We all love the sound of money, and a $1,500 sign-on bonus sounds even better. That's right, Bellisio Foods of Jackson is offering a $1,500 sign-on bonus to new employees. Receive an extra $100 your first 6 weeks, then $400 after day 90, and $500 after day 180. Don't wait. Apply online at BellisioFoods.com/careers today. That's BellisioFoods.com/careers. Come work for a company who truly values their employees. Come work for Bellisio Foods.
Well, happy Friday, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the morning show right here on Main Street TV. Of course, Jennifer here to start off your TGIF with our good friend, Phil Buffington in the house.
Hello.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Haven't seen you in a while. And of course, doing the morning news update. Our good friend Corey Ruby was here yesterday. We talked all about bees, so that was fun. And so Corey and I have another whole bee show planned because we didn't get into the whole ecosystem of how bees work. And then we started talking about, how do I say it, James, without being dirty?
I think you should just be as dirty as you want. It was the sexy stuff.
I mean, so basically after the show, Corey and I started talking about the way bees
procreate.
Yes, thank you. And so he started talking about it, and I'd be like, and then he'd be like, no, it gets better. I think he said, no, it gets better like 20 times because the story about how the whole thing happens is so unbelievable that you just, it
doesn't end well for the men.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to say. It does not end well for the boy bee.
I knew enough that they do like a little waggle dance to attract mates. That's the extent of my knowledge on bee procreation.
Well, it really doesn't end well for the boy.
Do you remember that animated movie where Ray Romano's a bee?
Yeah.
So he was asking me about
falls in love with a human.
I do remember that.
No, I know, because Corey was like, "Did you see the Bee Movie?" I'm like, "No, I don't know."
You're like, "What is that?"
I don't have children, so no, I did not. But no. So I thought it would be really fun to have him come back and just talk about the whole cycle of a bee's life. And I mean, he was telling me stuff. I was just like, "What?" You know, the girls make this part of the hive, and the boys do this, and the queen does this, and unbelievable stuff. It's like he was making it up. I was like,
he may have been. It's not like
it's
not like you went home and looked into this stuff.
It's not like we were fact checking, were we?
Yeah.
But anyway, no, that was a really fun show yesterday, and so we thank Corey for coming in. But our good friend Phil is here today. You got nominated because Pete's on vacation.
Yep.
And we didn't get to do news yesterday. So Phil drew the short straw and has to come talk with us this morning. So thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
So we haven't seen you in a while. What have you been up to?
Oh, there's been a lot. Been out covering a lot. Especially this week, there's been quite a bit of things. We had our incumbent Republican Attorney General Dave Yost was in town for a fundraiser Wednesday evening.
I didn't know that.
Yep. He was over at Park's Edge. A small group of people got together over there. And about an hour prior to that event actually getting started, he sat down with myself for about a half an hour to just talk about his campaign, some of the accomplishments he's had in his first term as Attorney General, what his plans are for the future. And then we kind of got into some topics like the new concealed carry law for Ohio that went into effect on June 13th. I know you guys talked with the sheriff about that recently.
Yes.
And House Bill 99, which pertains to educators in Ohio being able to carry firearms if they so choose, and the school districts decide to allow that. So we had a very lengthy, productive discussion.
Well, that was the one, like we asked, or James, I think, brought that topic up with the sheriff, and he said he was very familiar with the concealed carry part of it, but
Mhm.
not with the teacher part of it. So if you learned anything about that, please, let us know what you found out.
Okay. Yeah. Well, the concealed carry was through Senate Bill 215, and then the separate matter with the teachers was House Bill 99. They both recently went into effect. Senate Bill 215 actually went into effect on the 13th, but the governor approved that back in March. There was just a little bit of a gap there between when it was passed and when it actually went into effect.
Okay.
So much like with the discussion that you guys had with the sheriff, when I broached the topic with the attorney general, he wanted to be clear that this new law does not do away with the ability of somebody to go out and to still get a concealed carry license. He still encourages that very much.
Yes.
He likened it to electricity or chainsaws. They're very useful yet dangerous tools, and you would be a fool not to go out and familiarize yourself with those before you decide
And
to use them.
respect it. Yeah. Absolutely.
So he was adamant about the fact that he's a Second Amendment supporter, and that his office litigates to defend the Second Amendment. However, the Second Amendment is not meant to defend criminals that use guns for violence. And not to get too far off topic, but one of his main reasons why he wanted to run again was his unfinished business with the NIBIN program, which is the National Integrated Ballistics Information Network, that is actually going to tie into the federal ballistics database. And I wanted to ask him in particular about how that plays in with the passing of Senate Bill 215, and if that would, hinder his efforts with these ballistic reports, which is meant to be able to better capture criminals that use guns for violence.
Okay.
And it taps into the ATF's database, and it allows Ohio actually is now the first state in the nation to have access to these databases. But
that sounds like a good thing.
It absolutely is. And he said, the impact with this new constitutional carry law in relation to the NIBIN program is going to be very minimal because, as he said, the bad guys already didn't have concealed carry licenses because they don't care about the law.
Sure.
And he says, I'll quote him now, "I think the people who are prone to do violence with guns are going to do violence with guns, whether there's permitting for law-abiding citizens or not." And he said there are 22 other states that have already done the constitutional carry laws. And if there was going to be, a significant spike in gun violence because of constitutional carry, that it would already have been seen, and that's not the case. That hasn't been how it's been so far. And he said anyone serious about the Second Amendment, like I said earlier, is going to get a CCL. And the reason being is you don't want your Second Amendment right to stop at the state line. Now, this is where very fresh news comes into play because just last night, the Supreme Court struck down a New York law that restricted gun carrying rights, and it's probably the most important judgment the Supreme Court's made on firearms in the past 10 years or so. And in that decision, that jeopardizes similar regulations that were in effect in states like California and New Jersey, and it's expected to allow more people to carry guns legally, specifically and narrowly in New York. But since it's a Supreme Court decision, that affects everyone in the country.
Okay, so is that with a concealed carry permit or without a concealed carry permit?
Well, I believe in New York's case, it's with a permit.
It was just really hard to get a permit in New York.
Yeah,
I see.
And the reason being is in New York, the court voted just yesterday by a vote of 6-3, with the 3 liberal justices dissenting, that there was a law in place. This all got started, locally in New York, and it went to the district courts, went to the appellate courts, and finally made its way to the Supreme Court. And basically, there was a restriction in place in California where it required its residents to prove that they had a proper cause to carry a concealed firearm in public. They had to prove that they needed it. Which is super subjective, and is, as the Supreme Court decided, was against the Constitution. So in New York's case, they had very strict laws in place that actually made the petitioner prove that they needed to carry a firearm for their own safety, which, I mean, it
This
seems
was like
pretty difficult.
Well, the way I understood it listening to NPR this morning, it sounded like this was a thing that went back to like the mafia days, trying to cut down on how many people were carrying weapons back.
Okay.
back
It goes back to the early 1900s when
Yeah.
this first went into effect. And yeah, so the new law,
It was basically giving them, you know how like Al Capone didn't get arrested for all the bad stuff, he got arrested for tax evasion.
Yeah.
Racketeering and
right.
stuff. Yeah.
This was something they could arrest these guys for having firearms.
Yep.
Basically, was what this was passed for back in the
I
20s
gotcha.
or whatever.
So that's a bit antiquated. Then
Yeah.
it seems as if.
and so like I said, this narrowly affects New York, but since it's the Supreme Court of the country, it affects everybody in one way or another. And in particular, now that we've passed the constitutional carry law, we're fine in Ohio, but there's states like California and New Jersey and several other states where they're going to have to probably rush to brush up on their gun laws to be in line with the Supreme Court ruling. Otherwise, anyone that's arrested for a concealed carry violation could reserve the right to take it to the highest court and have it overturned.
Sure. Well, I guess it's just one of those things that I guess you don't think of unless it personally affects you or whatever. But, those states individually are going to have to think about this. And, states like California certainly don't want to think about things like this. They have other things to do. But it is something. And it does get confusing with the crossing state lines stuff.
Yeah, and that was one of the main things that I know you guys talked about with the sheriff, and that I talked about with Attorney General Yost just the other day. But with this ruling, that changes a lot because, as Attorney General Yost said, a lot of people that respect the Second Amendment will still go get the CCL in light of the new constitutional carry law because they want to have the ability to cross state lines.
Correct,
to
and
have
that makes
reciprocity.
the most sense.
Yeah, and before you had to worry about that reciprocity, but now, with the Supreme Court ruling, there is reciprocity. You don't have to worry about that anymore. So it's going to change quite a bit.
It is.
And also, just last night, the U.S. Senate passed the first national gun control bill in nearly 3 decades by a 65-33 vote.
This is all so contradictive.
Absolutely.
It's so crazy.
And that new law includes measures at expanding background checks for gun buyers under the age of 21. It offers funding to states that have emergency programs in place to actually seize guns from those that are deemed dangerous by a judge. So they definitely go against one another.
So you have the Supreme Court, then you have Congress doing things on the opposite ends of the spectrum.
And I mean, President Joe Biden went out almost immediately after the Supreme Court ruling and was speaking out against it. Several leaders across the country spoke out against it. But
the mayor of Buffalo, where that mass shooting happened a couple weeks ago, was a very vocal opponent of it. I heard him speaking this morning.
Yeah. And New York probably had the most stringent firearm laws in the country up to this point.
So this is getting really deep, but this goes back to, I understand the Supreme Court rules, right? And I understand that they kind of have the final say, and I get that. But this goes back to everything, what laws apply in Ohio. I don't know necessarily that you can blanket that over New York or California or whatever. I mean, you have a completely different population.
Yeah.
You have a completely different way of life, of living. And this is kind of where I almost feel like the state should make the decisions.
Well,
but
in Ohio's case, we're
I'm not going to argue with the Supreme Court, but
right. Well, it's just like in California with the marijuana laws. You're able to just recreationally smoke marijuana despite the fact that it's still federally illegal to do so.
Right.
And in Ohio, we're a home rule state. So let's say the county passes a law, and then the city of Wellston has its own version of that law. The city of Wellston law supersedes the county's law because they're home rule.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
And so if the state passes a law and the county has its own version of that law, the county law supersedes because Ohio is a home rule state. But regardless of, I mean, the feds could at any time go into California and shut that down if they decided to, because they have that right to do so, because the federal law always supersedes any other law.
Okay.
They just have always given leeway to states to govern themselves. And I think that that's what the founding fathers probably intended, because the states do have a good bit of power.
Because that gives you a choice. You have a choice to live in this state or that state, or, you know, whatever, you know, you agree most with, or whatever, you know, floats your boat kind of thing. I don't know. It's just all a matter of opinion. And at the end of the day, unless you live your life surrounding guns, I guess it doesn't make that much difference one way or the other. But
and like the sheriff noted the other day too, I mean, it was never illegal for anyone to have a firearm openly. You can open carry. That's the Second Amendment. You can't conceal it.
Which is, I think a lot of people don't know that. Like,
Right.
I mean, you see someone walking down the street with a gun and you're like,
Yeah.
what?
Where the law comes in is when you try to conceal it.
To conceal it.
Yeah.
And this does put law enforcement in a little bit of a pickle because,
Yeah.
you know, but as they were saying, and even the Highway Patrol was saying the other day, like most people that are carrying and are being responsible are going to say, hey, I have a concealed weapon, just to let you know. I'm sorry I was speeding, but my gun is in the glove compartment, or my gun is in my trunk. I just want to let you know so that.
Always a good idea.
Yeah. Like, you know, the people that aren't saying that are the ones that you need to worry about, which kind of.
Well, he also said that if you have that concealed carry license, it shows up when they run your license.
Yes.
So you don't even have to say it. They're going to know.
Yeah.
But the problem is if you don't have so now it's still legal. It's legal to conceal carry without the license, which to me seems really just bizarre. Because you're supposed to follow laws that you don't know what they are, because you haven't taken the class to tell you what the laws are.
Yep.
So
I mean, it was good timing on Governor DeWine's part, because I mean, now we don't have to do anything to change our laws.
Yeah,
because we're in line, so.
Exactly. But it's like giving a 15-year-old a car and saying, "Here, just figure it out."
Yeah, like, it is. I think their hope is that more people will just continue to do the same thing that they always had, because like Attorney General Yost said, if you're a proponent of the Second Amendment, you're going to go ahead and get that CCL, because you want to be able to do things according to what's right, and you're going to educate yourself for your own protection and everyone else's.
I mean, if I were going to carry a gun, I would go take a class, because I don't feel comfortable enough to. God only knows what kind of fumbling would happen if I had a gun in my purse or something. And
there's a lot more to it than what people probably think. Yeah, I want to say too that Senate, the bill that passed the Senate last night still has to make its way through the House of Representatives and go to the president's desk. So it's not been signed into law yet. I imagine it will be signed into law.
It was fairly, I mean, as bipartisan as our Congress can get right now.
Didn't the House already pass something similar, and then the Senate?
There are several gun laws floating out there right now. This one in particular just passed the Senate last night, and it's the National Gun Control bill. But there's more than one right now. Okay,
so we touched on the teacher thing. Could you talk about that a bit? Because that was the one thing that, you know, our sheriff, you know, he said he took a lot of time and read the 33 pages of the other one, all the lawyerese of it. And, you know, it took forever to decipher it. And he said that they have like a chat room with other sheriffs and stuff. And they were like, how do you interpret this part of it? How do you interpret this part of it? Because, you know, when you start talking lawyerese and whoever wrote the stupid thing, you know, it is, some of it is subjective. Let's just be honest.
Yeah.
As you said. So, but the teacher thing, he wasn't as familiar with.
No, I haven't like really read the entire thing, but I did have a discussion about it with the Attorney General. And the main thing that people take issue with House Bill 99 is that 24 hours training that the teachers would be given in order to carry a firearm
into their classroom.
Right. And anyone who takes issue or has concern about that, the Attorney General noted, you know, that 24 hours training, a lot of people are comparing that to the 737 hours of training that you have to take in Ohio to be a police officer. And those just aren't It's comparing apples and oranges.
Yeah.
Because what he says is, these teachers wouldn't have to learn domestic violence law or how to write a search warrant or accident reconstruction or anything like that, or the Fourth Amendment. So they're only learning how to handle a firearm. And I mean, I myself, I was a probation officer. I had to go through a PATA firearms training. I think it was about 64 hours worth of training that I had to go through to handle a firearm. And I think 24 hours training for the limited purposes of what this is meant to do is plenty. That's my opinion. I'm sure, there are people that don't agree. And like the Attorney General said, would 32 hours be better? I don't know. Would 16 suffice?
Yeah,
perhaps.
Right.
But I mean, this is a decision left up to the people probably best suited to make that decision. And he wanted to note too, this is not something that's going to just go into effect blanketly and everybody has to do it and every teacher gets a gun. That's not the case. This is going to be left up to each individual school district, whether or not they decide they want to participate.
Right.
And then the teacher that decides to carry a firearm, has to be willing to, has to be vetted, and has to be authorized. They're not just going to hand out a gun to anybody. And he wanted to note too that a lot of the reason why this was even brought up is the FBI did a study of some of the active shooter situations that this country has had, school shootings and otherwise, over the past several years, and found that the average response time for law enforcement at an active shooter situation was 18 minutes. That's a long time to have somebody loose in a school with a gun.
That's a lot of bullets that can be fired. Yeah, for sure.
And so what this law in the Attorney General's eyes is meant to do is to be a stopgap during that 18-minute period between when the shooting starts and when the police officers can actually get there. And so, as he put it, if there's a retired MP from the Army in his grandkid's school and he knows how to use a weapon, he's been trained in that 24-hour training session, and he has the ability and opportunity to stop violence in such a way, he would want his grandchild protected. And I think a lot of people would probably agree that they would want that too. And another big argument with this is what happens when law enforcement arrives and they come in the building and they can't differentiate between who the bad guy is and who is the teacher carrying the weapon. And I asked the Attorney General his opinion on that. And he says, there's, different ways you can accomplish rectifying that. One being have the teachers train with the local law enforcement officers.
So they kind of know you.
So they know who's who. But he said what he would favor most is to make it a part of this law that once law enforcement arrives, you lay down your arms. If you're in there and you're a teacher and you have your gun, you know that the police have arrived, you put your gun down because you've served your purpose. Your role is that 18-minute, emergency response period before the police can arrive.
Or could there be, as the police are approaching the building or on their way responding, could it be that there's a database of all the teachers that have, those permits or whatever? I assume it would be some kind of permit situation.
I'm not sure.
To where they could say, okay, well, there's 5 teachers within that building that have a permit. Here's their names. I know you can't know whose name is what, but at least that would be some sort of indication of how many guns there may be in the building or with teachers in a building. So
right, it's going to take a lot of planning, and who knows what school districts will decide to do this and which ones won't. I'm sure there'll be a lot that decide not to do this.
The whole point of the matter is it's like so many other of these laws that get passed and whatever is everybody gets all freaked out about it. And at the end of the day, it comes and it goes and none of them, it's not that big of a deal.
And it's not done with malice. I don't think the governor, intended to pass a law that is going to put anybody in danger. I think it's quite the opposite. I think he just has, everyone's best interests in mind. And this is just a way, like I said, to fill that gap in between when the professionals can get there and handle the situation. It's better than the alternative, I think.
Yep. I do question, and I've heard this discussed so much about retired military or, whatever. Why on earth we don't have, with all the money that we waste and spend in the government federal government, why we don't have somebody in each school.
Yeah. Well, locally, we do have a lot of school resource officers.
Right. But sometimes they have to do multiple.
Yeah.
They might not be in that particular building at that time.
Right. I think in our county, I think that we're probably better off than what a lot of people realize, because I don't know how many people have ever tried to get into one of these school buildings.
James and I were laughing.
You
we
can't
tried
just
to
get
go
in.
talk to the cheerleaders like 2 hours after school the other night. We couldn't get in anywhere. Like, it took us forever to get into the building.
Yeah. I mean, measures are in place, and the sheriff said this too. I mean, there are measures in place already.
You're not getting into I know
No.
none of our school district buildings, you're
Nope.
not getting in.
Nope.
It's not happening.
They can see you approaching. You have to buzz yourself in, let them know who you are. And then as you even get into the foyer area or whatever, they can see you through the window.
Yes.
The door's still locked on, before you can even get inside. And then a lot of times at a lot of these schools, you have to then go into the office and get a name tag. And now I know if somebody's got a gun, they could maybe shoot out a window or whatever, but then that's when the school resource officer comes into play. And then, like in Wellston's case, a lot of their schools are up there in that main campus. So if there's a resource officer, if Officer Yardnachek is down at the high school, I mean, he could make his way up to the middle intermediate school fairly quickly.
Yes, for sure.
And in Jackson, I know that they're kind of separated. Their elementary schools are. But there is an officer, at least in Jackson and Wellston, and I think in Oak Hill also, that it's dedicated just to being a school resource officer. And I know they can't be everywhere all at once, but it's nice to have that presence there, and somebody who is familiar with firearms and emergency response, critical training like that they have. And I think that this House Bill 99 is just meant to supplement that and just to have that extra protection there. Hopefully, we don't ever have anything here that happens.
Point. It's just, this is like being proactive, not reactive, and
Right.
I think that that's just a very simplistic way of looking at it.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
If one child is hurt because it took law enforcement, whatever, and that's not knocking anybody. I mean, it takes time to drive from X to Z. If there's one teacher that steps in and holds somebody at bay or whatever until police get there, then it's a success.
Yeah.
That's great.
And I mean, that 18 minutes, that's an average and that's national. I bet you our guys would be there probably a lot faster than 18 minutes.
It'd probably be about 5, but still, I mean, that's a long time if you think about it when somebody's shooting.
Yeah.
Well, it took an hour. Where was that? The school shooting that just happened?
The one in Texas?
Yeah, it took them an hour.
That's insane.
To get there. And, there's a lot of heads that are going to roll out in Texas over that situation. But, that's a case in what not to do.
Yeah, absolutely. It really is.
But I don't know. It's interesting. It will be interesting to see how this all, whether it makes that much difference or not.
I'm anxious to see with the Supreme Court ruling last night, the firestorm that's about to come out across the country, especially in these states where they had these more strict laws in place, like Hawaii and Rhode Island, and there are several that are going to have to brush up on their gun law.
Well, they're going to at least have to visit it or revisit it.
Yeah. Otherwise, I mean, you stand every time you try to litigate against somebody, they're going to have that opportunity to just point to the last night's ruling, and it's overturned.
Yeah.
So
Supreme Court says I can.
Right.
Don't care what you say.
And I mean, it's a bigger deal than what a lot of people probably think. The Supreme Court hasn't really taken much action on gun laws in a very long time. And this is one of the bigger steps taken by the Supreme Court on just about anything.
Yeah. I wonder about this. Obviously our Supreme Court is off balance at this point, liberal versus conservative. So it's going to be interesting to see, they were talking about this Roe versus Wade thing, which don't even get me started on that because my head's going to pop off my body. But anyway, my husband's so tired of hearing about it. But it's going to be interesting to see with the lack of balance, what they do get passed, or obviously because this was a partisan.
It was definitely a partisan split.
Split, yeah.
The 3 liberal justices were dissenting, and we have a liberal president, but he immediately spoke out against it. Like I said, many people did, but it's what's done is done.
Yep.
So I'm sure that it'll be revisited down the road, maybe when there's a better balance on the Supreme Court. But
be interesting.
Yeah. On the more local front,
okay,
also law enforcement and legally related. This is a case I've followed for quite a while. It's been a little over a year since this all first started, but this is a case that involves 2 local defendants that are accused of causing the death of a 4-year-old last June. The Jackson County grand jury indicted 33-year-old Nathan H. Basden and the person in question in this story, which was the 4-year-old child's mother, 23-year-old Jasmine Music. They were indicted last August on charges of involuntary manslaughter, endangering children, and possession of a fentanyl-related compound.
So the child died of a drug overdose.
Yeah. So according to the police reports, it was June 15th, 2021. It was about 10 to 10 at night. Music called and reported that her 4-year-old son was unresponsive and not breathing. CPR was in progress, and emergency responders were actually on their way to the residence when about 5 minutes later, a neighbor called and said that those 2, the parents of the child, which I don't think Nathan Basden is actually the father, but he was the stepfather at least, that they were leaving the residence and heading toward the hospital. And so once the child got to the hospital and was in the emergency room, the medical personnel there notified the police and told them that it was suspicious. They requested the assistance of the coroner, and they said that the death of the child was caused by a drug overdose. The deputies went and searched the camper where they were living on Jackson Hill Road. They found numerous syringes, a loaded uncapped syringe, a light bulb that had been converted into a smoking pipe, and various other items of drug paraphernalia. They were arraigned, of course, pled not guilty. Their bonds were set fairly high. I think that they've since then been altered due to the bond law that passed recently, where you can't consider public safety when setting bail. But Nathan Basden, in this case, is still set to go to trial in, I think, September. Miss Music here was set to go to trial fairly soon, but recently she decided to change her plea to guilty.
Oh.
So let me find here where that actually happened. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, yeah, I think that was back in April. She changed her plea to guilty. And so all of the counts that she has will merge, and the state is going to proceed with the first-degree felony involuntary manslaughter charge. And that charge is subject to the Reagan-Tokes law, which says certain first and second-degree felonies that are nonviolent, they carry mandatory jail time. Her sentencing is not set until July 15th. On May 27th, her attorney, which is Public Defender Gene Meadows, requested a mitigation evaluation be conducted on Music prior to sentencing. And those evaluations typically focus on an individual's mental state at the time of the crime, psychological difficulties, medical problems, cognitive capabilities, developmental issues, education, exposure to trauma, socioeconomic factors, and issues that may have predisposed the defendant to commit a crime. And these are usually requested in an attempt to reduce the amount of prison time sentenced against the defendant. And since she's been deemed indigent, the cost of that evaluation would then be covered by the Jackson County Commissioners. But the first-degree felony involuntary manslaughter carries a penalty of up to 11 years in prison and a $20,000 fine. So we'll just have to see what happens at her sentencing. And like I said before, this is subject to the Reagan-Tokes law, and that is qualifying offenses are defined as all first and second degree felony offenses not subject to life imprisonment. I'm sorry, I said before it was nonviolent, but any first and second degree felony that is not subject to a life imprisonment sentence is subject to this law, which carries indefinite sentencing. So she will have to go to prison for some amount of time under the Reagan-Tokes law. So yeah, this has gone back and forth for quite a while. She was set to go to trial, I think, 3 or 4 times. But of course it got continued. So now that she has accepted this plea, we'll have to then follow closely with the second defendant in his case and see how that plays out. But yeah, this isn't the first, second, or third time that we've had a case in one way or another connected to drugs involving the death of a child. So that's always awful to hear, but we'll see how that plays out next month for Miss Music.
Don't understand it. Don't get it. Don't understand it. That's my opinion.
It just seems like in this case, I mean, now that if Mr. Basin goes to trial, we'll maybe get some of the particulars of this case. Otherwise, we probably won't know because those police reports aren't completely released. But it seems like the child, accidentally came upon a syringe and with the fentanyl-related compound charge, obviously a small amount can kill an adult. It wouldn't take very much.
Correct,
to kill
like a needle point of it.
Yeah.
So that's very unfortunate and sad.
Yeah. I'll go away from the depressing news now. And,
we like that.
Yeah. I know you guys had Mark Carman on recently.
We did.
And this month is 50 years in the automotive sales industry for Mark Carman.
Yay! Love us some Carman.
And I've been in communication with him over the past week or two, gathering some information about his past. I know he said he was originally from Indianapolis, Indiana.
Indiana, yeah.
And his dad, Bob Carman, first made his way here in 1969, opened his first car dealership, a Pontiac Buick dealership down at the Commissioner's Building at Portsmouth Street.
Yep.
And they first, made their way here. And Mark was probably a sophomore in high school then, and they went to Wellston for a short period of time before moving to Jackson. He spent those last 2 years of his high school career helping his dad, wash cars, fetch gas, do whatever he could. All the stuff
that kids do for their parents, yes.
All that fun stuff. But then, he aspired to do something more and eventually made his way into sales. And he officially first got his start selling cars in June of 1972, so 50 years ago this month.
Isn't that awesome?
Yeah. And cool. I mean, you can't meet a nicer guy than Mark Carman.
You can't.
He really is.
I mean, he is just the best. And, if your name's Carman, you have to be a car salesman.
Yeah.
I mean, it just doesn't.
Yeah. That worked out pretty well for him.
We're going to be a doctor. Like, that doesn't make any sense. But, no, he truly has done well. And he's.
Yeah.
And a lot of it has to do with his personality. And, he's just a great dude.
And I know car salesmen usually get a bad rap.
They do. Bad attorneys.
Yeah, right. But I'll say this. He really, I trust the fact that when he says, I'm doing my best to find, the best deal for these people, he really is.
No, I agree with that.
He's not trying to gouge anybody. And I think he spends a lot of time worrying about how high gas is and how high, car prices are nowadays and all that. And I asked him if he ever wanted to do anything else. And he said that there for a while, in the mid to late 80s, when things weren't going so well in the car industry, that he considered maybe doing something else. But at the end of the day, he said this is always what he wanted to do. And this is what he, obviously continued doing.
Well, he's done a great job of it.
Yeah.
50 years later.
Yeah. And he said, when his dad closed down his shop, I think it was in 81, Mark went out and said he got what he calls his college education. And so he worked at various local dealerships like Call Auto Sales, Dallas Chevrolet, Barnett Ford, Reichert, Don Wood, and, got that expertise that helped him, get him to where he is today.
Yep.
And throughout that time, that's when he met his wife, Sandy, who's been married to for 44 years. And they have their children, Amanda and Chris, and their 4 grandkids.
Yep.
They were recently shooting a new commercial down there and had all the grandkids, and we'll have a picture of that. And then the story in Saturday's paper for Mark and his family.
That's awesome.
So they're in their 3rd location now. I think their first opened in about 96, and it was down on Huron Street.
I remember that.
Across the street from the ball field.
I remember this is like, when I came back to Jackson and going down there and, talking to him about advertising and things like that. And it was that lot kind of floods sometimes. It was not probably the primo location.
I think our own JJ Hale actually worked.
He did,
for Mark for a while as a salesman.
Absolutely.
And then, of course, they moved from that location to a spot on 93, just I think in the area where Best Tire is now. Is that about right?
Yeah, about right there.
Across from West Banco.
Yeah, it's a white house there. It's got a big lot out the back. You can't miss it. I think someone lives there now, but and then he bought the location where they are now.
Yeah, and he was we were talking about how he stumbled into that property just the other day, and he said, we looked at it and we thought, wow, that would be a really nice spot, and it was up for auction, and I think Phil Bowman owned it. And it was like the day before the auction or something like that. And, he was talking with Phil about it. And he said, I'd really like to have that, but I haven't really gone and talked to the bank or anything like that. I don't really know how I could do this. And he said, well, just put in a bid. And if you get it, you get it. And if you don't, you don't. And on a whim, he did, and he got it. So that turned into where he is now.
Yeah.
And I don't want to go into I don't want to spoil his surprise or anything, but he was talking about the future plans for the dealership.
Even bigger.
Keep your ears open and your eyes open for that coming up here in the next few years. So there might be some exciting news.
Very, very exciting. One of the coolest locations in Jackson. Let's just put it that way.
Yep. Man, I've talked a lot already. Time's gone by pretty quick.
See?
I didn't get to really get into a whole lot. I don't know if Pete's talked about this, about the permissive license plate tax issue at all.
A little bit.
Okay.
They had a couple public hearings, and that's kind of where we left it. And then I think there was a thing where the commissioners hadn't come to the hearing, but they're the ones making the decision. So there's a little question about that, and that's kind of where we left it.
So they had those 2 public hearings last week. One was, I think, on Tuesday, one was on Friday. And I'll say this on the commissioner's behalf because they issued a response on Wednesday to the complaints and the concerns of the citizens that were in attendance at these meetings when they brought up the fact that the commissioners weren't there. First, though they are the ones that actually make the decision on this, this is a request from the engineer's office. This is a request from Melissa Miller. And believe me when I say the commissioners are very well apprised of this situation.
Sure.
This isn't new.
They're not willy-nilly going to make a decision.
No. This has been brought up for years and years. It actually was about to get formally presented to the commissioners in 2019, but they tabled it because the gas tax was about to be increased. And they wanted to see how that would affect revenue streams. Then COVID happened. The gas tax, hit bottom, and she lost money along with all the other county engineers.
Sure.
So this is being brought back up, and the commissioners noted on Wednesday that though their office is used for these hearings, that does not imply that it is anything to do with them in particular. It's used because it's a well-known public space. Mm-hmm. And now, since this has happened, the commissioners have decided that when office holders have these types of meetings and hearings, they will from now on either have to use their own offices or they'll have to use another public place so that they can stop the confusion with the public.
It is confusing.
Yeah.
For sure.
So the commissioners wanted to note Wednesday that they are well aware of what this subject entails. Obviously, they changed the protocol on how office holders can host these meetings and hearings. And they wanted to point out, too, as Melissa Miller has in these hearings and prior to, how much this is needed. And, if this $20, there are 4 separate tax issues being presented. If they were all adopted, they're $5 a piece. So it would be $20 across the board for all county residents. So in the city of Wellston, for example, people now, when they go get their license renewed, they pay $15 in fees.
Okay.
Jackson pays 10, Oak Hill pays 5.
Okay.
So if they enact the 20, the Wellston people that are paying 15, they will pay 20. Where the difference comes is on the back end. So that $15 will still go to the city of Wellston. The remaining 5 will then go to the county.
Gotcha.
So that's the simplest way to put it. So people right now that live right on the edge of Wellston, that live outside the city limits, pay
Right.
$0.
So that's me. So I live out in Franklin Township, so I have it pretty easy.
Yep. So you'll
but
pay
this
that
would,
20.
Yeah. So
Yep.
this would, in fact, enact us to pay the same tax basically that everybody else is across the board, but our chunk of it would go straight to unless something else is passed or whatever,
Well,
our chunk of it would go to, to Melissa Miller's office.
Yep. And
To the engineer's office.
they have the ability to pass all 4 of these. 1, 2, 3, none.
What are the
So,
different? Do
well,
you know
where the difference
$5?
is? Where the difference is how that money is divvied up. So there are different ORC sections that accompany each one of these.
Okay.
And let me see. I have all of this broken down. The different types of these permissive taxes pertain to where the money goes on the back end. So certain ORC sections allow municipalities or townships to keep all or some of the fees, and others require all the revenue or some of the revenue to go to the county. So under one of these ORC sections, which is 4504.02, 100% of the revenue collected will go to the county. Okay, and 0.15, 50% of the revenue collected by the municipalities will go to the county, and 70% of the revenue collected by the townships go to the county. So then the remaining would go to those municipalities or townships. So aside from Engineer Miller's office, if all 4 were enacted, she's looking at about $620,000 additional revenue a year that she would get. And she's committed all that money to go toward road paving.
See, and this is the whole thing. I mean, like, you think about, okay, you're paying this, but it's going toward, we all complain and whine and cry about our roads and this and that. I mean, it's, standpipe has always been, which is where I live, has always been, relatively nice. And just with all this weather and craziness that we've had, it's starting to really deteriorate. So, that's what this money goes to, is
Right.
to pave these roads and to keep them nice so you don't lose your car in the middle of one of those holes.
And that's one of the points that the commissioners brought up on Wednesday. Though there were some complaints from, I think, a total of 7 people throughout the course of these 2 hearings, there are hundreds and thousands of complaints every winter about potholes and, this, that, and the other about the roads.
We live in Ohio. Like, it happens.
You can't... The main catalyst to why this is being reintroduced now is when Engineer Miller goes out and applies for grants, which she has to heavily depend upon to help with the 264 bridges that she's responsible for, in addition to the 300 miles of roadway she's responsible for.
Yep.
She has to seek grant money. On one of the recent grants applications that she filled out, one of the questions was, have you implemented permissive license plate taxes? And if you answer no, then you are deducted points. So,
right, because they're like, well, you aren't paying for your own weight.
Right, exactly. So say that there's a 15-point possibility total for a grant application. That one question alone can count for up to 5 points.
Sure.
So then you lose out on grant money. And
Right.
if you lose out on the grant money, in addition to not bringing in revenue from a tax like this, then it's only going to make matters that much more worse.
Yeah.
And it should be noted too that in addition to the $624,000 or so dollars that are going to go to the engineer's office, if all 4 of these are enacted, all the townships and the village of Colton, they're all going to benefit also, just not as much, but there will be money going into the townships. The city of Wellston would continue to benefit from what they have enacted already. Jackson. Sure. So everybody would get a little bit of something from this, and everybody would get more paving. So, and there's going to be an infusion of federal money coming over the next 5 years. I think $40 million overall to the state that's going to be divvied up just for bridges. So that frees up a little bit of, her budget too, to do paving, because she's had to focus so much on these bridges since she took office in 2010 or 11 that, she admits that paving has kind of been put by the wayside. So
makes sense. This
would allow her to get caught back up on that. And she's had to take out, over $3 million in loans from the OPWC over the years to help with paving, and that money's got to be paid back eventually.
Right.
So she's up against the wall with this, and she herself said that she understands nobody wants to pay this.
No, but nobody wants to pay more for anything, and especially right now.
And the commissioners, they back that too. But as they pointed out, one person paying a $20 fee for their vehicle registration equates to less than $1.70 a month. And as Commission President John Hensler said, that seems a very small amount when you're talking about over $500,000 that's going to be dedicated to paving.
Well, let's talk about how much does a new tire cost you?
Right.
When you hit one of those potholes and your tire bursts.
Yeah.
Because that happens all the time.
And so that $1.70 was brought up, I would think, in response to the people at these hearings that were saying, there are a lot of people in the county that are on fixed incomes, and this additional burden is going to make the difference between food and medicine. For $1.70 a month, come on.
Right.
Nobody wants to pay more money, but nobody wants to drive on crappy roads either.
No.
And we're at the point where we're not just talking about potholes. There are certain roads, like Raysville Road, for instance, is to the point where they have to make a decision of whether they just let it go back to gravel.
Oh, is that bad?
Yeah. We're to the point where we're going to have to decide what roads are going to be gravel roads, not just having potholes.
It's insanity.
Yeah. So it's worse than probably what a lot of people think. And in 2021, the whole year, Melissa, and this counts grant money, loan money, all of it, had $5.1 million. And that's for payroll, that's for equipment, that's for everything. And I know that sounds like a lot of money.
Yeah, well, do you know how much the stuff that they put on the roads, just to keep the ice down costs? Like, it's insane.
The amount of money it takes to pave a mile of road is, you wouldn't believe it.
It's insane.
It is. And for her office to be able to do it themselves, it has to be under $30,000 a mile, which is not even close to what it costs.
Yes.
So they're into forced accounts with the state, where the state makes you bid that out.
Yes.
And get the contracted work. So it's not like she can just cut corners.
Money.
Right. She can't just make the decision, say, I'll just pave it myself.
Yep.
Because you're forced into it. So they didn't make a decision on this week. They will be meeting again Tuesday morning at 8:30 at 275 Portsmouth Street at the Courthouse Annex. And this is likely to be voted upon at that time. So they are inviting anyone and everyone that wants to have a say in this to come and bring it up then. But,
if you don't go, don't complain about it.
Right. And they were put into the position where they felt like they had to say something to defend themselves, because just about every person that was present for these meetings, and I was present for both, for the duration of both, had something to say about the commissioners not being there. But they already know about this. They know all about it. They know more about it than I do. They know more about it than, Joe Schmo does down the road. So. Right. They didn't purposefully avoid the public in these meetings, and they wanted everyone to know that. That's the story that I read about this. Both are online now. The response from the commissioners will be in the paper on Saturday, so you can check that out in more detail and learn all about it before next Tuesday. There you go.
Oh, he's done now. No, that's a lot, and thank you so much for all of that, because that's a lot. And in talking with Dave Yost about this gun thing, I mean, this thing can go on, and it's just so convoluted that thank you for telling us the facts and going through all of it and deciphering it, because it's
I'm glad I had the opportunity.
very confusing.
I'm glad I had the opportunity to talk to him about it, especially right so close to when all this really actually happened.
Right.
And to have somebody like that explain it to you, I mean, you can't have a better opportunity than that.
Kind of straight from the horse's mouth.
And we got
to,
stuff. I mean, we got to sit and talk for almost, I think, 45 minutes close to, and he was really accessible. Of course, he's up for election this November. He's facing his Democratic opponent, Jeff Crossman. So this will be his second term, and he's hoping to garner some support. But anything about these laws, these new gun laws, can be found on the Ohio Attorney General's website.
Right. There's any number of places that you can go to read this stuff.
Yeah.
So, if you want to have sit down and try to decipher the lawyerese, go for it.
Mhm.
Or you can read Phil's article, and it'll be a lot easier to understand.
Yeah, I assure you it will be. Yeah.
No, we were laughing with our sheriff, Ted Frazier, and I want to thank him for coming in and talking about that too. But yeah, he was like, do you know how long that was? It was 33 pages. And he's like, I read it, and I read it again, read it again. And then, when you have questions, you have to start asking those questions, because something may or may mean something to you that means something different to somebody else.
Yeah.
And so when things are new like this, it's hard to enforce because you're not exactly 100% sure. So,
and like he said too, laws when he first started used to change, every 4 or 5 years. Now they're changing every month.
Yeah,
it's
100%.
Constant.
I think about just in my case, like the liquor laws that changed during this whole COVID thing. I mean, it was a monthly sit down, and luckily we have resources. The Ohio Craft Brewers Association is amazing. And then I have our attorney would send out a newsletter too, but every month.
Yeah.
And sometimes it was weekly.
Mm-hmm.
Things were changing, and that's how it is with everything. And hopefully things will slow down now that the pandemic's we hope that the pandemic's
Lord, I do.
whatever. But
yeah,
I mean it's tough when things change all the time. It's hard to keep up.
It really is, because you have to continue to do what you do every day, and then brush yourself up on the law every other day too. So
correct.
It's a lot to keep in mind. It really is.
Yes, absolutely. So, and sometimes things fall through the cracks, and understandably shouldn't, but they do.
Yeah.
So.
We're only human.
Well, what do you have a fun weekend planned, Phil?
I'm going to cut the grass and
ooh,
projects and all kinds of stuff.
So you just bought a house, right?
Yeah.
Congratulations. That's exciting.
Thank you. Yep. I'm constantly doing something.
Yeah.
I'm learning
Welcome
my limits.
to the world of homeownership, right?
Yeah. I just fixed the upstairs shower the other day. I fixed Christy's car the other day. I built a fire pit.
Whoa.
I'm busy. I had to cut up a tree that fell down.
Want to come help me fix a commode sometime?
I could do
I was
that.
gonna
Hey, buddy,
say,
I'm
I've
telling
got
you.
some projects in my house that definitely need done.
I'm learning that I'm pretty handy. I didn't know that.
Don't admit that. Do not ever admit that.
Just don't buy a truck either. People are going to start asking for help all the time.
Do never buy, especially a long bed truck.
Yeah.
I found that out. And don't admit any of that. No, because you're going to be in trouble.
I already am. I've come to find.
Yep.
But yeah, I'm having fun with it. I'm getting stuff done.
It's fun to work on projects like that.
I'm keeping my grass cut and judging my neighbors a lot.
There you go.
I'm all over it.
You're getting old when all of what he just said happens.
Yeah. I can't believe they only cut their grass every 2 weeks. Look at that.
What's that? Is it insurance commercials when you act like your dad or your parents or something?
I definitely do now.
It's so funny.
I don't know when it happened,
true.
but it happened. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, well.
That's me.
Well, hey, we have a lot of stuff going on this weekend. Today, James and I are going to head out to the Jackson Post to the Highway Patrol. We're going to head out and do some filming and interviews out at the open house that they're having today. You all are welcome from noon to 5 out at the Jackson Highway Patrol Post. There's going to be all kind of people there from all different divisions. If you're interested maybe in a career with the Highway Patrol in any facet that may be, it could be anything from computers to dispatching, to my goodness, of course, being a trooper. But there's so much stuff out there. They're going to have all of those people out there today. So we look forward to that. We're going to go out there and hang with them today. Also, the DM Davis Vocal Choir, don't forget, the combined choirs are presenting America Sings, and that will be this coming Sunday, June 26th at 4 p.m. That's at the Marquee right here in downtown Jackson. If you get those tickets in advance, they're only $5.
Nice.
And they're going to sing all kind of fun patriotic songs to get your 4th of July week kicked off properly. So it will be a good time. Plus, they are just ridiculously talented folks.
Yeah, they are.
Absolutely ridiculously talented. So that we have going on as well.
And I just learned this last night. There's going to be a night market at Oak Hills Central Memorial Park from 6 to 10 p.m. And that's hosted by the recently opened business Birth and Bloom.
Okay.
So yeah, that's going to take place in Oak Hill too.
And what day is that?
Saturday.
Okay.
I think
Saturday.
the Oak Hill the Jackson Farmers Market opens tomorrow.
Yes,
Yes, it does.
starts tomorrow as well. Right across from Eddie Jones Park, right here in Jackson tomorrow morning.
Yep.
So
Lots to do.
lots to do. Kicking off the summer properly. Beautiful weather today. It's absolutely gorgeous. A little bit hotter, I think, tomorrow and Sunday, but that's okay. So get out and about, enjoy your time, and it's summertime, folks. Have fun with it.
Yes.
So
Stay cool.
stay cool. All right. Be cool. That's what Honey Bunny had to do.
Be cool, honey bunny.
Be cool, Honey Bunny. We won't go through that because it'll get taken off the air. Anyway, have a great weekend, everyone. We appreciate you so much for tuning in. Thanks, Phil, for spending your morning with us, and James for pushing all the right buttons. And we'll be right back here on Monday. Have a great weekend.